In a span of just 86 minutes, Vice President JD Vance completely dismantled the political trajectory of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, with the entire globe tuning in live. What insight does the vice president have regarding everyday labor? She questioned, triggering 11 seconds of sheer stillness. He then uttered a concise phrase, "I was 21," while the Marine stared unblinking. Ocasio-Cortez remained unaware that her professional political life had a mere 86 minutes remaining. Ultimately, her personal mobile device would cause her undoing, alongside a weathered picture safely kept within his coat pocket. By dusk, an urgent digital message sent by her manager would be displayed across televisions nationwide. On a Tuesday morning within the walls of Hart Senate Office Building's room 219, the nation prepared to witness a confrontation between a former bartender and a Marine. She paused midway through her words inside a room filled to its absolute limit, closely monitored by 3 active C-SPAN cameras. Her smartphone lay screen upward on the smooth timber of the testimony table. Just as she extended her arm to grasp a glass of water, the mobile display illuminated. The zoomed-in C-SPAN 3 lens captured the alert well before her aide could react. The text stated, "Cease speaking. Vacate." He possesses the emails, prompting the aide to lunge forward over an 8-second interval. While the entire nation observed the blunder, Vance completely ignored the smartphone, smoothly opening a bound leather journal instead. Its initial sheet was entirely empty, marking the 11th minute of the ongoing inquiry. The event had formally commenced at 9:03 a.m., with every single one of the 212 available chairs occupied. Testifying was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, appearing before the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. A prominent sign on the table displayed the session's focus: concealed funds in U.S. politics, 10 years of progressive PAC deception. For half a dozen years, an official grievance filed with the Federal Election Commission concerning the Justice Democrats' PAC had remained entirely inactive. However, a federal grand jury was secretly convened in the Capitol that February. The following month, Saikat Chakrabarty, her previous chief of staff, received immunity in return for total collaboration with authorities. Come April, political finance journalists were well aware that a major revelation was pending, and she had offered to testify willingly. Her PR personnel had essentially forced her to take the stand, ignoring the frantic protests of her legal counsel. They convinced her this appearance would serve as an unparalleled platform. She had been meticulously prepped on the specific phrasing intended to establish the atmosphere. At exactly 9:07 a.m., she executed the remark, glancing up from her prepared introductory remarks. Staring straight at the panel, she asserted with certainty that she wished to confront the obvious issue. She challenged the vice president's authority, noting he had authored a book on Appalachian destitution, profited immensely by selling the rights to Hollywood, accepted venture capital from Peter Thiel, and was now criticizing working-class women, concluding by asking what he genuinely understood about blue-collar workers. This prompted rapturous clapping from progressive advocates in the audience, while a trio of Sunrise Movement participants rose in support. A journalist representing a progressive audio program offered a slow nod of approval. 41-year-old Vice President JD Vance offered no immediate reaction. Having occupied his seat since 8:47 a.m., he kept his leather journal shut on the desk. Next to it lay a solitary manila envelope, while a Marine Corps clasp sat flawlessly aligned under his collar. A delicate silver pendant of Street Michael dangled from his neck. He avoided checking his device, refrained from conversing with the presiding chair, and maintained a stern expression. After 11 seconds of fading applause, the Sunrise Movement activists hesitantly took their seats. Vance flipped a leaf in his journal to reveal nothing, then turned to another blank page before raising his gaze. Drawing a heavy breath, he broke his 26-minute silence with the phrase, "I was 21." He proceeded using a monotonous, unwavering vocal tone that would persist for the remaining 86 minutes. He detailed his past as a combat reporter in Iraq with the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing, earning a meager $1,200 monthly pre-tax. He emphasized his lifelong working-class status until his 2016 book deal, contrasting it with the Congresswoman's background by noting she was 29 when she defeated Joe Crowley, having already served as a compensated Justice Democrats organizer for 2 years, and pointing out that she had abandoned bartending by 2017 to craft a political persona for her 2018 run. Following a 3-second pause, she initiated her rehearsed, rapid counter-argument. She retorted that his remarks exemplified a targeted personal assault on a Hispanic woman from the Bronx. She accused the vice president of resorting to biographical attacks to deflect from his policy shortcomings, claiming this was a typical conservative tactic to marginalize women of color while affluent white men with venture capital sat in judgment until he interjected. Without raising his volume or shifting his pitch, his statement, "I am not done," Congresswoman brought her to an immediate halt. For 7 preceding years, the Democratic establishment had promoted Ocasio-Cortez as the embodiment of tomorrow. This vision of tomorrow was a blue-collar server from the Bronx who publicly criticized billionaires via short social media posts. The future supposedly rested with the bartender aiming to tax the affluent. The party had heavily invested in this image, broadcasting it across all recommended digital channels and shielding it for 7 years from fact-checkers, ethical grievances, and primary opponents. It had served as a highly effective persona, but that persona was currently occupying a witness seat in Hart 219. About to learn that the opposing Marine had utilized the past 26 minutes to calculate his move. Grasping the manila folder, Vance placed it down without revealing its contents. He referenced her public tweet from February 14, 2019 at 3:47 p.m. EST, where she celebrated the cancellation of Amazon's Long Island City headquarters as a victory for everyday New Yorkers against corporate avarice. He then asked if she continued to support that declaration. Her press chief in the second tier offered a tiny gesture of agreement, recognizing this anticipated topic. Having practiced this specific dialogue, she answered with an emphatic absolutely. She argued the Amazon agreement would have ruined the Long Island City neighborhood, ousted working households, and gifted $3 billion in tax incentives to a massive corporate entity at the expense of public education, expressing pride in the community's vocal opposition. Opening the folder to reveal a single sheet of paper, Vance picked it up. Shielding it from general view, he placed it where only he and the C-SPAN 3 feed could view it. He pronounced the initial figure 27 billion, signaling to the chamber that a critical turning point had arrived. Vance clarified that this was not a corporate estimate, but the 10-year economic forecast generated by the Democratic-led New York City Independent Budget Office, cementing it as public fact. Glancing at the solitary page, he resumed reading. He cited another IBO statistic, $2.7 billion in anticipated municipal and state tax income. Using a blank page in his journal as a mere marker, he turned it. He continued listing facts. Amazon's 25,000 promised roles in Queens averaged $150,000 annually. Moreover, a local union representing 18,000 electrical workers had secured a tentative agreement for over 1,000 unionized construction jobs that ultimately shifted to Nashville, resulting in lower-paying, non-unionized roles filled by out-of-state laborers. Ceasing his reading to lock eyes with her, he noted that the Long Island City Community Board, the Queens Borough President, the Democratic City Comptroller, and local polling, which showed 71% citywide and 63% district-level approval, all backed the initiative, proving she blocked an opportunity her own residents actively desired. AOC attempted another swift deflection, arguing that polls do not dictate economic fairness and claiming the corporation would have worsened gentrification and suppressed unionization efforts before being abruptly told to take a breath. She paused, sensing a distinct shift in the room's attention toward her. The applause from the progressive onlookers had ceased a quarter of an hour prior. The Sunrise activists nervously monitored their mobile devices, and the left-leaning journalist ceased his approving nods. From the gallery's second tier, a black male nearing 40 rose to his feet. He sported a dark blue coat featuring the carefully stitched emblem of IBEW Local 3. In his left grasp, he held a creased piece of paper. An observant Capitol Police guard stepped forward quickly, preparing to use his communication device. Raising his right hand, Vance halted the guard and addressed the standing man. "Sir, declare your identity for the official log," he instructed. With a voice that was firm yet trembling slightly on hard sounds, the individual introduced himself as Marcus Williams, a black Democrat and union member from Brooklyn who had supported Clinton, Biden, and Ocasio-Cortez. He explained he lost 3 years of local contract work due to the Amazon cancellation, forcing him to commute to Pennsylvania and miss seeing his young son. He concluded by stating he visited her workplace because she would never visit his home to face his spouse. As he sat, the chamber remained frozen, and Vance allowed 4 heavy seconds of quiet to linger. Following Vance's gratitude, AOC scrambled to recover, expressing sympathy for his hardship, while blaming decades of failed economic strategies and the corporate structure of Amazon. Interjecting seamlessly, Vance corrected her, emphasizing that Williams was an IBEW worker whose wages, benefits, and retirement would have been safeguarded by the union, meaning she obstructed a labor opportunity that the union desperately wanted. Maintaining his relentless tone, Vance revealed that he possessed an unanswered letter from Local 3's leadership sent in February 2019. The mere mention of the letter's existence served its purpose without him needing to display it. He then listed numerous other ignored correspondences from that same week, including letters from the Bronx Borough President, City Council members, the Queens Chamber of Commerce, African American real estate professionals, and the Teachers Union. The visual impact highlighted a harsh reality. While the Democratic Party spent years framing AOC as a working-class hero, the actual working-class organizations in her city had been pleading with her to acknowledge their communications. The situation spoke for itself, requiring no additional political spin. 2 Democratic media assistants in the 4th row discreetly shut their portable computers. An aide for a fellow New York Democrat who had backed AOC's re-election started texting frantically. This soon-to-be leaked message declared an urgent need to retract their support. Down in the 2nd row, her communications head halted her phone browsing and rested the device face down. A writer from the Progressive Nation magazine abandoned his note-taking entirely. He sat frozen with his pen raised, observing Marcus Williams weep silently while gazing upward. Flipping past another empty leaf in his journal, Vance proceeded. He instructed the Congresswoman to reflect on whether discarding 25,000 jobs, billions in tax funds, and union positions against the wishes of 71% of the community was ultimately justified by whatever she replaced it with. 8 seconds of absolute silence passed as she failed to reply, opting instead to glance at her aide. The aide stared at a dark phone screen. Over 7 years, the party had falsely assured millennials they were the vanguard of the future. In reality, the boroughs of the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn constituted the current reality. That reality was currently embodied by a man in an IBEW Local 3 jacket sitting in row 2, awaiting a response he would never receive. Shutting the folder and placing it down, Vance turned a page. Finding text on the 4th page, he pivoted to the topic of her 12 years remark at exactly 9:31 a.m. The room's display screen illuminated to play a pre-cued segment. The footage captured in January 2019 at a Manhattan MLK. Now, gathering lasted precisely 43 seconds. It featured the newly elected New York representative, sporting a crimson jacket and bright lipstick, delivering a fervent speech into a microphone. The audience observed her proclaim that the globe would face destruction in 12 years due to climate change, mocking concerns over how to finance the solution. As the video concluded and the screen darkened, Vance allowed the quiet to settle before inhaling. He pointed out that 7 years had elapsed, yet the world, the oceans, and her district remained intact, albeit with the Bronx suffering increased poverty. Reading from his notes, he cited United States Census data showing that 31% of households in her specific Mott Haven zip code struggled with utility bills, marking the highest rate of energy poverty in the state. Turning the page, he noted that during those 7 years, she helped pass the Inflation Reduction Act, unleashing $1.6 trillion in federal green subsidies, with projections reaching $2.5 trillion by 2034. He then delivered a crushing statistic from the Department of Energy. Average electricity costs in her district surged 41%, forcing her constituents to pay thrice via federal taxes, monthly utility hikes, and inflated product costs for a transition that remained unrealized. You sold them a deadline. You delivered them a utility bill, he summarized, prompting her counterattack. Relying on a prepared statistical defense from her PR team, she confidently asserted that the IRA birthed hundreds of thousands of clean energy jobs, highlighting a well-paying Honda EV plant in his home state of Ohio, to accuse him of cherry-picking local data to undermine a massive achievement. Vance permitted her to complete her thought, pausing 4 seconds before responding. He acknowledged visiting that very Ohio plant and praising the jobs, but clarified that those beneficiaries were not her constituents. She had outsourced economic gains to other districts while inflicting massive bills on the people whose names were on her office door, labeling it policy displacement. He paused again, allowing the sheer weight of the moment to anchor itself in the room. Then he repeated his most piercing line in an unexpectedly hushed, serious tone. You sold your generation a deadline. You delivered them a utility bill. This declaration was not directed at the Congresswoman, but rather aimed squarely at the viewers tuning in from modest homes and vehicles nationwide. For years, this demographic had been convinced that looming environmental doom necessitated every financial burden and regulatory hurdle. They had been persuaded that the individuals increasing their expenses were concurrently rescuing humanity. They believed the financial agony was justified to prevent the end of the world. However, the apocalypse never materialized, though the exorbitant invoices certainly did. The ecological shift was enriching conservative regions, bankrolled by taxpayers everywhere. The vice president had just articulated this undeniable truth on a live broadcast. Up in the seating area, a youth sporting a vivid Sunrise Movement shirt rose calmly. Foregoing any disruptive outburst, she methodically removed the bright garment. Revealing a dark undershirt, she neatly folded the green top, left it on her chair, and exited the chamber without seeking anyone's gaze. This precise action was documented by the C-SPAN feed and was destined to go viral by midday. Identified later as Hannah Lemieux, the 23-year-old had campaigned for AOC since she was a teen in 2018. She had personally funded her bus trip from Boston that very dawn. She would never lend her support to AOC again, as 3 Democratic aides exchanged panicked looks nearby. A junior staffer adorned with a Wellesley badge began messaging furiously. She texted her superior, a California representative, warning that AOC was ruined and demanding an immediate public disavowal. At the rear, a Capitol Police guard caught a quick directive through his earpiece. He absorbed the order, offered a single nod, and maintained his post while Vance turned a page. Observing a handwritten note on the following leaf, Vance kept it to himself. He simply glanced at the script before initiating a discussion about her controversial gala outfit. He extracted a dense physical dossier from beneath his materials. Boasting a stiff, dark blue cover, the document spanned 26 pages. It bore the standard governmental font of the House of Representatives Committee on Ethics. The title specified it as a July 2025 report concerning Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Instead of waving it for the press, he positioned it for his own clear viewing. He identified it as a unanimous, bipartisan document crafted by a dozen lawmakers, released the previous summer, and proceeded to recite its definitive verdict. Locating the specific text, he read that the committee determined she had illicitly accepted heavily discounted luxury items and event access for herself and her partner during the 2021 Met Gala, failing to compensate the providers promptly. Meeting her eyes, he highlighted that she was mandated to remit nearly $3,000 for a lavish package worth over $3,700. Yet she had only paid $1,000 6 months post-event, and only after facing a public grievance threat from a designer. Returning to the text, he recounted how her team used her media clout to slash a $1,300 dress rental fee down to $300, an act the committee condemned as an illicit gift. Putting the dossier away, he noted the irony of her garment's "Tax the Rich" slogan. He detailed how the affluent elite subsidized the astronomical ticket price, the wardrobe discount, and the premium transport, emphasizing that a bipartisan panel of her peers, not a partisan rival, confirmed these facts following an independent watchdog's complaint. She launched into a final, highly practiced maneuver to redirect the narrative. She dismissed the years-old scandal as a sexist smear meant to punish a minority woman for infiltrating a wealthy enclave with an egalitarian message, insisting the panel found no deliberate malice. Vance seamlessly talked over her, reiterating that the unanimous, bipartisan committee formally declared she accepted forbidden gifts and purposely stalled payment until threatened with exposure, rendering her arguments futile against the official record. Resting his hands on the desk, he summarized that donning a heavily subsidized anti-wealth dress wasn't mere hypocrisy, but rather her core operational strategy. He achieved this without shedding his composure, elevating his voice, or leaving his seat. For the second instance that morning, he compelled the public to acknowledge the uncomfortable truths they had harbored for years. The attentive audience watched as Committee Chairman Johnson leaned in. Breaking his 23-minute silence, the chairman inquired if the vice president was ready to introduce the next witness. Vance affirmed his readiness to the chairman. A petite, 60-something Hispanic lady made her way from the rear to the imposing desk. She was clad in a basic dark sweater over a light top and gripped a weathered purse, taking a seat offered by the clerk. She occupied the chair adjacent to AOC, who remained seated. After taking the oath, she was introduced as 61-year-old Maria Elena Vasquez. Her residence was listed as apartment 3B at 1287 Westchester Avenue in the Bronx. She had managed the Vasquez mini market in her building's lower level for nearly 5 decades. Following her husband Rafael's death in 2019, she single-handedly navigated the business through a pandemic, civil unrest, supply shortages, soaring leases, and disruptive neighborhood construction. She kept the enterprise alive until the end of 2024 and began communicating through a translator. She declared her intent to clarify the permanent closure of her shop. Translated smoothly, she explained that a new local green energy mandate required unaffordable electrical upgrades to her aging commercial gear, compounding the severe utility rate hikes and a massive rent increase driven by the building's necessary eco-retrofits. With her children living far away and the shop netting a mere $42,000 annually, paying her only $19,000, she was forced into closure. Shifting her posture, she locked eyes with the Congresswoman. The translator delivered her crushing conclusion. Despite her family's loyal voting history, her shop's entire yearly profit barely surpassed the cost of AOC's gala ticket and dress, proving they had elected a deceptive persona, not a true champion. The translator maintained a professional tone while Vasquez visibly trembled, plunging the space into absolute dread. The cameras fixed an unyielding gaze upon the interaction. The PR director in the audience lost all color in her face. AOC remained paralyzed, her hand gripping her beverage. In a desperate bid to salvage the situation, she offered profound apologies while claiming to be a relentless fighter. The translator cut her off with a blunt, "You have not a statement so clear it transcended language barriers." Vance thanked the witness, dismissing her. However, she remained seated, observing Vance peruse one last item. It was a solitary paragraph printed on church stationery. Vance noted it was a fresh statement from Father Miguel Rodriguez of St. Anthony of Padua Parish in the South Bronx. Reciting the text, he highlighted the priest's condemnation of the Congresswoman for flaunting her faith for cameras while abandoning her actual congregation, noting she hadn't attended Mass in years or visited their overwhelmed food pantry, always claiming to be unavailable. The letter concluded with a poignant reminder that the Bronx community was present and still waiting for her. Putting the paper away, the political destruction reached its absolute zenith. A pair of Democratic aides in the third tier bolted from the chamber. A seasoned journalist aggressively underscored a note on her pad. The communications head firmly shut her device, placing her hand stiffly on her lap. A young non-Muslim spectator who had worn a headscarf purely to show political allegiance slowly removed the garment. She neatly arranged it on her legs. The act of wearing it had been nothing more than a superficial nod to AOC's coalition of identity politics. She had complied solely because the political machine dictated it. With the machine now silent, she sat aimlessly with vacant hands. The Congresswoman's phone had sat inactive on the table since the hearing's start. Her dedicated team had ceased all digital communication 40 minutes prior. Legal advisors had explicitly warned them that the broadcast lenses were capturing every visual detail. As their assistants vanished, a fatal notification popped up at 9:50, 1 a.m., clearly captured by the camera, containing an attached resignation draft. Panicking, the adjacent aide lunged to flip the device over. She executed this cover-up in plain view of multiple broadcasting networks. Senator Gallego, a tough Hispanic veteran from Arizona who had been silent, finally put down his writing instrument. Grabbing his mic, he requested permission to pose a single query. Chairman Johnson granted the floor to the Arizona lawmaker. The 46-year-old senator was the offspring of a Colombian father and Mexican mother. He had survived severe destitution in Chicago's urban landscape. Earning a path to Harvard, he immediately joined the Marines post-graduation. His combat tour in Iraq with Lima Company resulted in the loss of 23 comrades. A devoted Democrat, he served extensively in the House before his 2024 Senate victory. He embodied the exact genuine narrative that AOC had artificially cultivated for herself. Representing the authentic version of her fabricated tale, he fixed his gaze upon her. Speaking extemporaneously, he demanded a binary confirmation of whether the Justice Democrats' PAC funneled roughly $1 million into a private shell company managed by her own campaign director, Saikat Chakrabarti. After a dozen agonizing seconds of silence, she fumbled for words. She attempted to frame the issue as a complex web of legal entities, but Gallego aggressively cut her off, pointing out the public nature of the filings and Chakrabarti's own immunized confession, reiterating his demand for a simple yes or no. When she dodged again by citing complexity, Gallego concluded the exchange by noting the record would reflect an affirmative response. He settled back into his seat and released the microphone. He remained completely silent for the duration of the event. This respected Hispanic military veteran had just successfully cornered her into acknowledging severe electoral financial deceit on a national broadcast. Every token of identity, race, military reverence, and working-class struggles had been effectively neutralized. Her standing as a loyal party member was equally decimated. Every protective layer her image had accumulated over the years was stripped away by a man who genuinely possessed the background she only mimicked. Moving to the final section of his journal, Vance retrieved a pile of documents. Placing them down, he identified them as 47 private emails surrendered by Chakrabarty to federal authorities under an immunity deal and stated he would only read two. The first, dated May 2018 from AOC to Chakrabarty, explicitly requested routing consulting funds through the private LLC to keep her name off official records. The second, Chakrabarty's immediate reply, confirmed the illicit structure was active and untraceable as long as they avoided a paper trail. Setting the evidence aside, Vance quietly outlined the full extent of the fraud. He detailed how the PAC collected donor funds and paid the private LLC for vague services, allowing Chakrabarty to secretly finance her campaign operations while dodging federal transparency mandates, moving $1 million in total. He stressed that these deliberate concealment tactics constituted massive federal offenses, which a grand jury was actively investigating. Panic-stricken, she reached for her drink but missed completely due to severe tremors. Her shaking hand knocked the mobile device slightly out of place. It balanced precariously on the table's lip before tumbling. It landed on the rug with its display still shining. The automated camera lens instantly focused on the bright screen for a full 8 seconds. The message from a contact labeled M was broadcast to millions. The text commanded her to flee because he had the emails. An aide seated behind her yearned to intervene, but was paralyzed by strict legal warnings against tampering with evidence. He remained awkwardly suspended for those torturous 8 seconds. This brief footage was destined for endless rotation on news channels by midday. It would amass over 73 million views online before the day ended. That precise moment permanently erased the meticulously crafted facade she had maintained for years. The visible panic directive on the fallen phone told the true story. The artificial persona, the secret manager, and the strict talking points were all exposed. Years of supposed grassroots fury were unmasked as a heavily managed production guided by an anonymous figure urging an immediate retreat. Ignoring the fallen device, Vance slipped a hand into his jacket. He produced a small, vintage photo he had carried all morning. He had kept its existence a total secret from everyone. Without fanfare, he laid it out for the camera to see. The lens focused on an aged monochrome portrait. Captured in 1998, it depicted a senior woman in a simple kitchen clutching cleaning supplies. Clad in a worn floral robe, her hair was tightly secured. She stared back with the profound fatigue of a lifetime laborer asked by her grandson to pose for a photograph she didn't entirely comprehend. Vance refrained from dramatically brandishing the image. He merely let the broadcast equipment capture it as he spoke. Introducing her as his grandmother, Mama, he described her grueling 4 decades cleaning homes in Ohio, raising him and others, and her loyal history of voting for Democratic presidents from Carter through Obama until a phone call in 2016 shifted everything. She reached out to him after a long period of silence. He quoted her exact words from that evening, stating that the party had abandoned them to serve only their own interests disguised as altruism. As a 32-year-old, he hadn't fully grasped her meaning. Directing his attention to the Congresswoman, he affirmed he finally understood. He revealed Mama died in 2005, missing his Yale graduation and avoiding the grim realization of what her beloved party, and AOC specifically, had devolved into a faction that abandoned domestic laborers to champion individuals who wear borrowed luxury gowns to elite events. He declared the modern Democratic Party belonged to AOC, entirely disconnected from his grandmother's values, noting that future generations were currently witnessing this profound shift. The enormous hall plunged into utter silence as he gave her one last look. He uttered a final, crushing sentence. "We were both 29, Congresswoman. One of us served, one of us sold." Her hand crept toward the discarded phone, but halted mid-air. It hovered above the floorboards for 43 excruciating seconds. The microphone captured her panicked breathing, cementing the audio for future political documentaries and attack campaigns. Ultimately, she lacked the strength to retrieve the device. At precisely 9:53 a.m., Vance rose to his feet for the first time. He silenced an attempted remark from the chairman with a raised hand. Bypassing the crowd and the media equipment, his words were meant solely for her ears. He advised her to secure immediate legal representation for the ongoing federal probe and her impending DOJ interrogation, adding that while they shared the same broken nation and generational deceit, he felt genuine sorrow that he was the one delivering her ruin. He retrieved the worn picture, staring at it briefly. Tucking it away alongside his journal and folder, he gathered his materials. The ethics dossier and the stack of incriminating emails were collected. Everything was stowed inside his leather case, which he snapped shut. He marched out of the room without casting a glance behind him. He ignored the shouting reporters swarming the corridor. Bypassing his security team and his mobile device, he headed toward the Capitol transport. Taking the underground tram to the building's eastern edge, he climbed into an idling armored vehicle. The SUV spirited him back to the White House grounds. He vanished from the public eye for 2 full days. AOC remained immobilized at her desk for 6 agonizing minutes. The smartphone stayed on the carpet while her aide remained frozen in place. The merciless lenses documented her every twitch until the chairman formally paused the proceedings. Armed guards ushered her out a restricted exit to evade the media mob. She ignored the barrage of inquiries and the glare of photography equipment. Not a single syllable escaped her lips. Before noon, Senator Bernie Sanders' team had issued a brief communique declaring that the progressive wing shields no one from accountability amidst severe accusations. The statement glaringly omitted her identity. Pundits instantly recognized this as the moment her primary political benefactor severed all ties. Shortly after, the Justice Department verified the existence of a Washington grand jury probing her affiliated PACs. Her premium legal counsel released a hurried update confirming the receipt of federal notices. The 3-sentence dispatch pointedly avoided any claims of innocence or outright denial. Mid-afternoon saw the Sunrise Movement, her foundational support network, issue a terse comment. They merely indicated a reassessment of their political affiliations. They, too, refused to mention her name. Later, the Bronx Democratic Committee stunningly revoked its campaign endorsement by an 11-2 margin, with only familial and loyalist dissent. Concurrently, her former chief, Chakrabarty, now a California candidate, issued a detached remark about his full legal compliance. He stated the legal facts were obvious and offered no further commentary. His political fundraising surged by 22% almost immediately. By twilight, Maria Elena Vasquez had rejected every profitable media invitation. She took the crowded subway from Union Station back to her borough. Exiting at Cypress Avenue, she strolled toward Westchester Avenue. She walked past the sealed facade of her former mini-mart. A persistent reporter caught her attention, prompting her to pause. In hushed Spanish, she stated she merely told the truth and was heard. Retreating into her home, she permanently exited the news cycle. That evening, a pair of driven Democrats launched primary campaigns for her 14th district seat. Both contenders were younger, fiery Hispanic individuals. Both possessed authentic, gritty Bronx upbringings devoid of prestigious university degrees. Neither had ever poured drinks for a living. They weaponized the identical slogan, "The Bronx deserves better," featuring one devout churchgoer. The other was a celebrated Marine, while the internet exploded with views of the damning text message and the photograph of Mama. The footage of the final verbal strike surpassed 92 million digital plays. Apparel bearing the serve versus sold quote flooded the market overnight. As dawn broke on Wednesday, AOC remained completely mute. Her massive digital platforms had shown zero activity for 16 hours. It marked the most prolonged blackout of her entire public life. In the chaotic aftermath of the highly publicized hearing, the stoic Capitol Police officer who had maintained a vigilant, unblinking watch at the rear of the chamber would forever remain unnamed to the public. The severe security threat reported that frantic mourning had not been directed at the Congresswoman, as the mainstream media assumed, but rather at Vice President JD Vance himself, originating from a completely unrelated and obscure source. This particular officer had deliberately requested this high-stakes assignment for a reason. His motivation was deeply personal. His older brother had endured the brutal realities of combat in Iraq alongside Vance. Vance remained completely unaware of this silent guardian. When the grueling day finally concluded, the weary officer retreated to his home. Stripping off his heavy uniform, he sat down at his modest kitchen table. He looked at his loving spouse and shared a single, profound reflection. He explained that he had stood tall for the entirety of the day because duty demanded it, but now he intended to rest. His wife, accustomed to the silent burdens of his work, simply nodded, understanding without requiring a single detail. Miles away in the South Bronx, a different kind of quiet reckoning took place. Father Miguel Rodriguez led a dedicated evening mass at his parish, honoring the brave truth-tellers and the resilient, overlooked laborers of the city. Over 100 individuals filed into the pews. They were a diverse tapestry of the neighborhood. Many were not practicing Catholics, representing the working-class minorities the political establishment claimed to champion. Throughout the powerful homily, the congregation sat in absolute, reverent silence. When the modest collection plate was passed, this struggling community gave from their hearts. Against all odds, they raised over $4,000. This remarkable influx of grassroots generosity would ensure the parish's critical food pantry could continue its mission, successfully feeding 1,100 desperate families that week, just as it had faithfully done for nearly a decade. As the nation's newsrooms erupted into a frenzy, the vice president actively chose total restraint. He firmly declined every exclusive media invitation that evening. He extended this deliberate media blackout through the following turbulent day. There were no victorious social media posts, no gloating digital commentary, and absolutely no grand public declarations. Instead, as nightfall descended, he sought the quiet refuge of his official residence at the Naval Observatory. He shared a peaceful, private dinner with his wife and young children. After lovingly reading a bedtime story and tucking his daughter in for the night, he found his own rest. At the break of dawn, he sought spiritual grounding with a solitary visit to the cathedral. Then he simply returned to the demanding duties of his office. He would never utter Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's name in public again. For an extensive period spanning multiple years, the deeply entrenched political establishment had remarkably and successfully convinced an entire hopeful generation of young citizens that they were the absolute ultimate defenders against the rampant forces of corporate greed. They had carefully built a massive, seemingly impenetrable facade of working-class solidarity. However, inside that densely packed, historically significant Senate chamber on that fateful Tuesday morning, a solitary, determined Marine methodically and systematically dismantled that grand illusion piece by piece. By simply and quietly displaying a faded, vintage photograph of an exhausted, hard-working domestic worker holding a sponge, his own grandmother, he forcefully compelled the disconnected political elite to finally confront a genuine, living casualty of their incredibly misguided elite policies. Faced with this undeniable, stark reality resting upon the polished wooden desk, the powerful politicians possessed absolutely no coherent rebuttal. They sat in stunned, suffocating silence, completely unable to defend the glaring hypocrisy that had just been dragged into the harsh lighting of the hearing room. The entire stunned nation watched this unprecedented, dramatic unmasking unfold, live across thousands of television screens and millions of glowing smartphones. The deeply disillusioned, exhausted generation of voters, people who had been completely crushed under the overwhelming daily burden of skyrocketing electricity and utility bills, heavily alienated by a continuous stream of broken, overly ambitious ecological promises, and finally recognizing the true, wealthy allegiance of their carefully manufactured political icon, decisively and permanently rejected the fabricated, superficial narrative on that crisp April morning. They realized that the soaring rhetoric they had eagerly consumed was nothing more than a highly coordinated marketing strategy designed to elevate a select few while leaving the actual working class behind to foot the massive bill. The absolute, undeniable, and historic reckoning was finally and totally complete. The air in the room fundamentally shifted as the undeniable truth took root in the collective consciousness of the American public. There was no going back to the way things were before that long exchange. The honorable, unassuming veteran simply packed up his modest leather portfolio, turned his back on the chaotic media circus, and quietly went home to find peace with his loving family. Meanwhile, the invincible, heavily funded, and fiercely protected political brand that had dominated the cultural landscape for 7 long years was permanently, completely, and utterly extinguished from the American national stage, never to be resurrected or trusted again.